All right. Hi. You guys can lower your hands and use your camera if you want. Just helps me read the room in terms of how much of what I'm saying is being understood. Also, am I properly audible to everybody? Is this good? Okay.
Yes,
I'll
ma'am.
just share my screen.
Yeah.
Right. First of all, congratulations to everybody who's made it to the state rounds. Um, I hope you do well. Also, this is from here on, you're going to qualify as a team. So teamwork is really important. The first step in the process is just to know your teammates and know them in time. Like, don't wait for the 11th hour to start, to initiate conversations with them. There's a couple of things that we'll be covering today in this orientation. So I'm going to tell you about the format that we're going to follow in the interstate rounds, and then about the category specific modifications that we always have and how they're going to work. Please make a note of it, right? If you want to open a new Google Doc where you're putting in all these details to never forget them over again, that's a very reasonable thing to do. So please do try doing that if this is something that you might forget along the way, which you will, because there's a lot of like the speech duration and everything is going to be confusing if you don't just have it written somewhere for later reference. Right. Then there's FAQs, there's tips and tricks. There's a couple of things that I can perhaps share you with as generic advice on what to do, what not to do in the interstate rounds when you're going as a team, etc. I think we'll be covering all of that as and when we come to it. But in terms of the format, first of all, could all of you just give me some idea on your understanding of the format? How many of you have been to at least one debate tournament where this format is was followed? Or like how many of you know anything about the format, like at least the structure of it and the speaker order? Okay, two, three, 10 people, 10 out of 50. Okay. And if you don't know the format, it's completely all right. So don't just raise your hand because you see others doing it. Cool, 15. Okay, there's a lot of people who don't know the format, which means cool. So basically, the WSDC format, this is how, first of all, it stands for World Schools Debating Championship. This is the format that your more like a lot of your international tournaments happen in, especially school level. And there's other formats as well, this being one of the formats that is followed. There's other parliamentary formats, of course, like BP, etc. So the one that we're following right now is WSDC. That said, please do not go to the internet, type in WSDC and expect to find the right kind of details there, because we have modified the format a little bit so as to make it beginner friendly, right? So please just listen to me and come back to this PDF if you want any clarifications. Do not go to the internet assuming WSDC is the same everywhere, because yes, it is, and it shares attributes of the format, but it also has its own specific modifications which the tournament mandated. Now, that said, each team here has three members that you already know, right? Each team is going to have three members, and then there's three speaker roles. So there's the first speaker, second speaker, and the third speaker. They're called the prime minister or the leader of opposition, depending on the side you're on. If you're the first speaker, the second speakers are the deputy speakers. It's deputy prime minister if you're gov. It's deputy leader of opposition if you're op. And then there's whip speakers who do the weighing and like the biased adjudication in the debate. This is so they are called government gov whip when they are from side proposition, and your op whip if you're the third speaker from side op. Now, those of you who've practiced this format somewhere elsewhere would know that this also happens to have a reply speech. That reply speech is scrapped here. It's not going to be uh, used, right? So the last speech that you're going to have in each round is going to be the opposition whip speech. So please prepare your whip speeches accordingly. You're both summarizing and weighing in the same speech. So whatever you want your reply speech to do in general is something that needs to be accommodated in your whip speech now. Those of you who don't know what the reply speech is because it's the first time you're getting to learn about the WSDC format, it's perfectly all right. So WSDC, just for your general information, also has reply speeches. We are not doing them though. So in general, they have reply speeches though. Cool. Now about POIs. So POIs are basically interjections, questions that you ask to your opponents. So one team can ask the other team a question. That's how POIs work. I'll explain POIs in detail for the people who are completely uninitiated in the format. But POIs are going to be there for you in this round, is what you need to know first and foremost, right? It is only the junior category which will not have POIs. So the way to take a POI or answer or give a POI is this, right? Let's say I'm delivering my speech and I've started and the timer started, right? And the time is running and I'm delivering my speech, delivering. And then it's for the first minute, you can't ask me a question because this is called my protected time in the speech. The first minute is my protected time in which nobody gets to ask me a question and nobody will ask you a question. Like everybody has that protected time, and then I after from the first minute onwards until the start of like the fifth minute, this time is open for POIs. I'll tell you how they are taken and answered in this time, but then note that this is the time that you are that's like unprotected or where you can be asked a POI. So one to fifth, the first minute to the fifth minute is when you can be asked a POI, is when you can ask a POI to the other opponent that you have. In the fifth to sixth minute, the last minute also, you can't ask a POI. So the first minute and the last minute are essentially the minutes, I mean, which your protected time encompasses. So you can't be asked a POI in that time. Likewise, you can't ask your opponents a POI in that time. So protected time is first, last minute. Whatever time is left in between is your time when somebody can ask you a POI. Do you guys understand that much? Especially new people who don't know the format. Give me a thumbs up if you do understand that. All right. I need at least 25 people's confirmation. Okay, I think I'll give you space to ask questions as well. I've had 15 people say they've understood. Cool. So how do you ask a POI in the unprotected time? So there's preferences that you can offer, right? So like when I start my speech, I can say, hey, I'm Natiksha, I'll be doing the Deputy Prime Minister. I'll be the Deputy Prime Minister today. And my preferred way of taking the POI is there can be two preferred ways. Like you have to have one preferred way, but you have two options to choose from. One is saying I'll take my POIs through chat. Now this does not mean that somebody will type the entire POI in the chat. This means that when you say that you take the POIs from chat, you're looking at the chat box while you're delivering your speech. So your opponent will just say POI, all right, those three letters in the chat box. And that's your indicator for knowing that somebody wants to ask you a question. Once you've seen that POI pop up, you either say, okay, I'll take your POI, or you decline. You say, okay, I'm not going to take this POI, and you move, you like continue as usual. So the thing is that getting asked a POI in the chat does not imply that you write the entire question in the chat box. That's not the way to go about it. You only write those three letters to indicate that I have the intention of asking you a question. Would you like to answer? All right. Now, if you say that okay, I don't like to take it through chat, I'll be looking at the timer. I'm not looking at the chat box. You say I'll take my POI. And you like verbally, which means that the opponent can now verbally unmute themselves and say POI, those three letters again. But then there'll be an interruption in your speech. So I'm speaking, and somebody can just unmute and say POI in the middle of my speech if I give them the leverage to do that, right? By mentioning at the outset that I'm okay with verbal unmuting, I mean verbal POIs and opponents unmuting themselves. Uh, Regardless of what somebody's preference is, please do not badger each other with like POIs. A reasonable person would take at least a 30-second long break before asking the next POI, right? Next POI as in before giving the next prompt. So once I've put POI here and somebody is not taking my question, they're not even acknowledging. That's to their detriment or not. We don't care. Like, but 30 to give it 30 seconds time to like give another indication of how you want to ask a question. Please don't keep saying POI like fanatics. Even if the other side does not respond, right? Or even if they don't acknowledge your POI in the chat. Sometimes it's fine for me to see that somebody wants to ask me a POI, but I'm indifferent to it. I'm not even looking at it. I'm not verbally responding to it. I'm not denying it or accepting it. This also means the ignorance then, or the silence then, also means that the person is right now not ready to take your POI. Please be mindful of those things. We don't want any instances of heckling or like inappropriate usage of this leverage of asking POI to badger others. All right. Cool. Just give me 1 second. Right. So now, besides POIs, I've already told you there's going to be no reply speeches. That's pretty simple. Please don't ask for any reply speeches. This has happened before. When there are no reply speeches, there are no reply speeches. Your speech will have to do it. Cool. Now the speech duration is for the senior category, it's 6 minutes, more than any other category, simply because like you're the senior category and we expect more. So 6 minutes is decent time for you to do your framing, weighing, everything that WSDC format in general has at international tournaments as well. So it's going to be a lot. The speeches, the speaker order is also going to be a lot like what general WSDC tournaments what you do for general WSDC tournaments, all right? There's not going to be a lot of modifications. Cool. Besides the timings, like the speech duration. All right. So this is the schedule for juniors, middle, senior. This is your schedule. Please have a look. Not like I'm sharing this for the first time, though. There's a format guide that was shared with you recently that has all of these details of what the schedule is like and when the motion release is supposed to happen. So round one starts at 3:30, ends at 4:30. Round two, 5:30 to 6:30. And round three is 6:30 to 8:30, which means 6:30 to 7:30 will be your prep time. And 7:30 to 8:30 should be your time for the match. So yeah, that's how prep time is going to be given for people who are wondering how impromptu rounds are going to happen. All right, cool. Motion release is 15th November, 12 p.m. So wait for it and we'll do it timely. Stance will be given on the spot. There's no, I mean, so for or against, we're not giving it to you beforehand, like we did for the qualifiers 1 versus 1. We're going to give it to you on the spot, which means you have to be equally prepared from both sides. Because I mean, any of the sides could be your stance for the round. Also, round one and round two. Now, listen to this carefully. I have had a lot of DMs. First of all, don't DM me, guys. If your DMs get lost in my box, it's like your problem because there's too many DMs coming to me. Imagine three categories, and each category having at least 150 something people, and people who haven't qualified also keep DMing you if you're the trainer and everything. So DMs are impossible to sift through. So please don't send DMs. Ask your questions on the group itself. Cool. But I have had a lot of DMs that said about round one, round two, and the prepared motion, and how are they going to be 4 rounds because there's also another motion for round three. So there's only going to be 3 rounds. The first and the second round are going to be on the same motion, but then the side that you're going to go from are going to be different in both the rounds. This means that in round one, if you're going for the motion and the motion is like motion one, then you will have to go against that motion in the second round. It is impossible for you to be doing the same side on the same motion in the 2 rounds. That's the only thing that's impossible here. You have one motion, you're going both for and against the motion, but then which round you're going to go for in and which round you're going to be against in is not something that you know right now. So that's where the suspense lies, and that's why you need to prepare from both the sides. So for some people, like for some teams, round one could be where you start. I mean, in round one itself, you go against, right? And then you will have to go for. But for some other teams, it's going to be the other way around. You'll go for first and then against. So because you don't know that and you don't have that clarity, that's why you need to prepare from both sides. Also, because sooner or later you're going to need cases on both sides in the first and the second round. So it's not a waste of effort in that sense. Now, coming to the third round, then, the third round is going to be impromptu. There's only one round on this one motion. The sides will be given on the spot. So you'll either go for it or against it, and that's the end of it, right? You don't have to think about, I mean, yeah, that's how it's going to be. I mean, there's really no debate about how if I'm going against, when will I go for, because you don't have to go for. You will be given a stance, one time allocation, and that's that. That's how we evaluate you, right? So here it's luck based. You could either be for or against, nobody knows. In the first motion, you get to do both the sides. Cool. Um, any doubts so far? Put them in the chat box. Okay, structure of speech. That's that. I'll try to help you with that a little bit. Also, don't direct message here on Zoom. It's difficult to keep track. What metrics do we weigh on in WSDC? So basically, the clashes, the common things that both the sides are talking about, are the things that you base your whip speech on. So by the time it's the whip speaker's time to deliver their speech, it's a lot of the debate has already happened. The most prominent arguments from both sides have already been shared. They're on the table. Now it's about prioritizing them, making them seem important, making them seem better analytics. Right. So it's going to be what was I saying? Yeah. So the prioritization and of clashes is something the web speaker is supposed to do. The weighing is primarily about finding out what is the most important thing in this debate. The most important thing being that both the sides have given equal importance to, have talked a lot about. And then how are we winning the debate on this most important point, right? That sort of a thing is very fundamentally crudely put, is what weighing consists of. The side for the third round will be declared along with the motion, right? No, no, no. I don't think it's going to be 1 hour before it's not going to be released with the motion. So motion will be released first and then stance allocation will happen on the spot. That's possible. But what's also possible is that you'll be given stance with the motion. But then be prepared to not have it too. Yeah, mosaic of identity we'll discuss. This is the theme. I'm coming to that. Okay, yeah, most probably the stance will be released. Otherwise, I understand why that might get difficult for you all. So we will release the stance. Maybe not immediately with motion release, because motion release itself is a very like difficult thing to do, because there's questions that people have, motion clarifications, maybe after motion clarification. So like, don't hold on to my words here. We'll give you the stance in time, but it's not going to happen soon after motion release. Like it can take 10 to 15 minutes post motion release, because understand there's going to be motion clarification that I'll be uh like barraged with, and I'll have to deal with first, and then I can get into the stance allocation. POI claim other than chat. I don't quite understand that question. You'll have to rephrase. Motion will not before like last debates. I don't understand the question. When will a match dates will be announced, ma'am? Match dates are already announced. Check your format guide, a PDF that was sent on the group earlier. 6 minutes to speak, yes. Each speaker gets 6 minutes. Structure will come to what metrics do we weigh on? What metrics I've explained. Oh, am I not perfectly audible to some of you? Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are.
Cool. Louder. Yeah, okay. I'll try being louder. Cool. Sorry about that. Cool. I was only able to join. I'm so sorry. Have I missed anything? I'm not quite sure. We're recording though, so the recording should be able to help you. Cool. I think this is it. So now about the speaker roles, I think okay. So this 1 hour is definitely not sufficient time for me to be able to explain speaker roles in detail. I'm going to try my best, but to understand this further, you can always use the internet, uh, selectively so, but then you can use the internet for this clarity, right? So when you're first speakers from either side, it doesn't really matter which side I'm talking about in particular. When you're first speakers, you're supposed to set up the debate, right? And setting up, I've already explained in the first round of trainings to you. It remains by and large the same. It just becomes more expansive now because you got 6 minutes and you need to make good use of it. So the framing will be more expansive now. It'll be more detailed. It'll be more intricate in the sense that I could be saying, okay, the world on my side looks like, I mean, the world on my side is one where there's political radicalization. That's something you can say and get away with in a 3 minute long speech. When it comes to a 6 minute long speech, you're bound to be more detailed than that, right? So you say that, okay, my world is a world where there is political radicalization, but then this is what the political radicalism looks like. And these are the stakeholders involved in it. This is the this is the relationship or the dynamic between these stakeholders, and this is how it impacts what we're saying, or this is how it shapes the arguments that we're going to perhaps uh, exclusively explain in the time to come. So the framing has to be a lot more structured, detailed. It has to have nuances. It can't be just like a one line statement. It was possible in a 3 minute long speech. It wouldn't be any longer. So the first speaker has to focus quite a lot on setting up the debate. Where is this debate happening? Who are the important people in this debate? How are they interrelated? Uh, which stakeholder are you worried about the most? Who is the most vulnerable? How are you going to cater to them? uh, who owes somebody reparations? Who is the stakeholder who's owed reparations, and why? Those kinds of questions you need to shine light on in your framing. But the second thing you're doing as first speaker is doing the primary framework of your case should be very evident in your first speech itself. Like, what are the arguments your deputy is going to analyze? Like, what are the arguments you're pushing? What is your understanding of the other side's case? If you're the prime minister, what is your guess? What is your preemption on what the opposition is going to say, right? And how do you respond to it? And if you're LO, how do you respond to your prime minister who's already gone before you, your setup? As in, if you're LO, you can either accept the setup that the first speaker from prop has given you. You can say, okay, political radicalization has been explained by our prime minister, and we see eye to eye on that. But then, if you do not agree with some layers of characterization, you might as well just say that we only partially agree with what Prop is saying. We think they are grossly mistaken in this aspect of understanding political radicalism. All right. So your degree of dissent might differ when you are going LO, but then some framing is required, right? So even if you're saying that, okay, we agree with all of what the prop speaker had said in terms of framing, that is also a statement that becomes necessary in some sense of the word, because you need to tell us what your positioning is according to the framing. Like, where is this debate happening? Do you agree with what your prop is saying? Do you disagree? If you disagree, to what extent? And if you disagree, what is your alternative understanding of the situation? Cool. This is what you do in the first speaker, all right? You do the setup, you do the argumentation, not very detailed argumentation, but argumentation nevertheless. Like, these are the arguments we're going to push, and our deputy will explain this further. But then don't burden your deputy with a lot of matter either. If you think these arguments require a lot of mechanization, do a little bit of detailing yourself, right? So, how your time is divided as first speakers is like this. Roughly speaking, this can definitely vary, all right? Uh, 3 to 2 to 3 minutes on framing, and the rest of your time in argumentation and what you think the other side is going to say. 2 to 3 minutes of framing is fine if that's what you want to do. But if you want to do less, that's perfectly all right as well. Cool. Actually, giving you a breakdown of how your time should be distributed is not something that I think of as ideal when training you all, because that's a very personal preference. I'm telling you what the constituents need to be. You structure it as you want, because that really doesn't matter. So sometimes I might require 3 minutes of framing to help somebody understand what I'm trying to say, but then you might be a lot more articulate and succinct as compared to me, as when it comes to our skills, or I mean debating skills in general. So the time doesn't really matter. Like, don't do 3 minutes of framing just because uh I said so. If you think you'll be able to complete it in less time, you're welcome to. Cool. The second speaker then on both sides, like deputy speeches in general, are supposed to do two things. One is rebuilding and the second is rebuttals, right? So remember it as the two important R's in the second speeches. So the rebuilding aspect is that, okay, your first speaker has gone, they've said something, but they've also been attacked. If your opposition is good, this means that if I say something, I'm likely to be countered by the opposition, which means that by the time it's your speech as the deputy speaker, your case is weakened to some extent, and you need to revitalize the importance of it. So the ways in which this happens is that sometimes people will say, okay, their argument does not stand because it's factually incorrect or something, in which case rebuilding would mean you have to reestablish the factual accuracy of what you're saying. Sometimes people will say, okay, whatever they're saying is fine, but we don't think it's likely to happen in this world. So in that case, rebuilding would mean you have to establish likelihood. Sometimes your opponent will say, okay, their argument is fine, but then the impact of it is so low and it impacts only one person in the world. We don't think this argument is the most important argument or constitutes the most important clash in the debate. In which case, you will have to explain the magnitude of impact or the in like general validity of your argument in order to rebuild your case well. So this is to say that rebuilding could mean 1,000 different things based on what's happening in the debate room at the time. But rebuilding basically, the way you get to right kind of rebuilding is to understand what how you've been countered, what the premise of that counter is, and how you can take down that premise with like a counter attack to the premise itself. So if somebody is targeting your likelihood analysis, you know that rebuilding will constitute likelihood analysis, right? If somebody is countering you saying you don't sound, I mean, you don't have enough mechanization in your arguments, you just do better mechanization in your argument. All right. So that's what rebuilding is. Basically, revitalizing the importance, significance, and validity, relevance of your argument in the debate. Your arguments could be meaningful, but they also need to be relevant in the debate. This means you have to constantly link it back to the motion and say, this is why this argument matters in this debate. Cool. The second thing that second speakers do is rebuttals. Pretty simple, right? If you're the second speaker, you've already heard the other side's case, you know what they're trying to ride on, you need to take that down, right? Rebuttals aren't always denial, though. It's not always a denial of the statements that the other side is making. Oftentimes, rebuttals are about strategic deconstruction of what the other side is saying. Okay, they are saying this, and I know it makes sense. There's no point denying it. I need to say, even if this harm exists on my side, I can mitigate it. I can lessen its impacts. Those kinds of things, right? So this is like incurring an injury, and a denial is to say, see, a pointless denial is when you deny that you have an injury, when you actually have it and one can see it, right? Don't deny everything because I mean, your opponent is also a rational individual and they're thinking, and somehow what they're saying is definitely making sense. So deal with it, accept it. And once you've conceded to some faults on your side, you can try to fix them rather than saying that, oh, this fault doesn't exist in my side in the first place. So what are you even talking about, sort of a thing. I see a lot of people rebutting like this. That's why I'm giving you that caveat, going out of my way, right? Cool. So that's revitalization. I'm sorry, that's rebuilding and rebuttals. Second speaker, mostly that's what they do. Structuring of the speech, deputy speeches are mostly very muddy and like not structured at all. So there's no specific structure that I can prescribe per se. And nothing I'm saying here is prescriptive, by the way. But in general, also, I wouldn't want to give any recommendation on, hey, this is how you should design your deputy speech because I have no clue. Every time I do a deputy speech, it sounds different because a deputy speech is completely reliant on what's happening in the debate room, you being an active listener, using your ready wit, and deploying the right kind of elements at the right time, which means sometimes rebuilding is important and that's very important. So you give 4 minutes of your 7 minutes to that, like of your 6 minutes to that rebuilding. But sometimes the other side is not good enough with the argument they're pushing. And I'm sorry, sometimes the other side hasn't attacked your case so much, but then the arguments they are pushing are really good, right? In that case, don't do rebuilding, right? Because your case is safe. Nobody attacked it in the first place. But go into the rebuttals right off the bat because their arguments as standalone arguments sound good. So, deputy speeches are about prioritizing what you think is important in the debate. That's not an input you can get from me to prepare in advance for. Cool. Third speeches then, whip speeches. Like I said, by the time by the time you get to the whip speeches, a lot of the things have already been said. And whip speakers can't introduce anything new in the debate. You can't bring in a new argument. You can't bring in a new stakeholder trying to analyze their perspective. What you can do is you can give new examples, you can give new weighing, you can give new analysis to existing arguments. But then the most important thing you do as a whip speaker is you say, this is my case, this is their case, and on comparing these cases, this is why I think I did better. This is to say that whip speakers are supposed to get into a biased adjudication. Biased adjudication, as in you try to play the judge, but then you're a biased judge. Bias does not mean becoming irrational, though, right? You assert the validity of your case, but you do not do it by divorcing yourself from rationality. You say rationally, intellectually speaking, and like fairly speaking, I think this is why we take this debate. So weighing means you take their side, like you understand the clashes in the debate. You understand what are the things that are most important in this debate that both the sides talk about. You identify them first. You understand what both the sides have said about that particular common thing, and then you explain why you did it better or what uh home flaw their case has, because of which your argumentation on the same clash sounds a lot more credible. So whip speakers are mostly summarizing, but summarizing in a way. I mean, see, summarization is not just saying, "Hey, this is what we said, and now judge, you do what you want to do," sort of a thing. Summarization has to be strategic. For example, when judge listen to your first speaker, maybe they said something really important, but then due to the recency effect, they probably don't remember what the first speaker said, right? Come on, guys. Senior category, please don't scribble on my screen. Also, I can see your name, so acting smart is not something you'd like to do here. The thing is that when you're looking, okay, wait, I can stop annotation. Yes, done. Okay. So the third speakers are basically doing this, right? Summarization has to be strategic in the sense that you repeat things that you want the judge to remember, not everything that you've said. So reiteration has to be like more concise. Reiteration also doesn't mean, hey, we ran accountability and then this is what all of our three speakers said about accountability. No. I mean, you could just simply say this, we ran accountability, this was the rationale behind it. This is what we meant by accountability, give three solid bullet points, two, four, however many, and then end it there. This means that, see, reiteration happens in debates, all right? There's a lot of things that your first speaker said, which you also will say as deputy, and then your whip will also say. But the thing is that reiteration has to happen strategically. So at one, like when my first speaker was talking about accountability, they were talking about it in isolation. When I talked about it as deputy speaker, I talked about it in relation to what the other side said. And when my whip speaker is talking about accountability, they are doing all of what the first two speakers did, but with additional feedback on how to adjudicate this clash. So every time you say the same thing, it is valid only when you're adding value to that point that's already been made. That's when reiteration holds water. In no other situation can reiteration hold water, right? So please make sure that the deputy speech does not sound a lot like the first speech, or the whip speech doesn't sound a lot like the deputy speech. Try to maintain that distinction and keep adding value as and when the speakers are done with their speeches. Cool. That's it from my side on speaker roles. This is the most I can do in the time that I've been given. Please put your questions in the chat box. I'll take them. Quickly going through this also because this is so easy. So yeah, 6 minutes, and this is the speaker order. You can have like 15 to 20 seconds to gather your thoughts before your speeches. That's perfectly all right. Just notify the judge that you'll be taking 15 to 20 seconds. Don't let it run into a minute though. Nobody's going to give you a minute before you start your speech. That's too much time taken. This we'll share. You can read by yourself. Motion release, just go through this. Prepared rounds 1 and 2, same motion will be released on 15 November, which should be tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow. An impromptu motion, like I said, will be an hour before the third debate starts. And your stance will also probably be allocated in that time, but not immediately after the motion release. Okay, before I talk about these things, just go through these points if you have no doubts by yourself, and then I'll explain quickly. Meanwhile, I'll take doubts from people who have them. Okay. Madhur, this is the last time I'm responding to this question. I'm not going to do it again. Yes, each speaker will get 6 minutes. Will this presentation be shared with us? Yes. Uh, Finals will be on 26th November, IIT Delhi. Would the speaker roles be prescribed or chosen amongst them? Yeah. So teammates can choose which speaker roles they're going to do, and this can change in the rounds. So if in round one in my team I'm doing first speaker, and in round two my team wants me to do second speaker, that's perfectly all right with us as the OC. Cool. If you miss the majority of the session, Arjun, you can just watch the recording. Will be told in the group like last time. Yeah, emotions will be on the group. POIs, there's no limit to POIs, but max to max, I have only ever seen a speaker take maximum two POIs, not more than that. So two POIs is a lot, by the way. Even if you take like one POI per speech, that's great. One POI per speech is okay. Um, okay. Identity we will discuss. That's the sub theme. All right, I think I'm done. When we come to know about a topic for a motion. Shreyanshi, come on. I just showed you the table which said that the motion leave is going to happen on 15 November. Guys, be active and all ears, please. It's difficult to repeat stuff. How will you know which teammate should do which speaker role? Well, that's where you should talk to each other about your strengths and weaknesses. So sometimes, if you are a very analytical person, you'll be a good deputy speaker, right? Because you need ready wit, you need immediate responses to arguments. So the person who can think on their feet, they are active in rebutting, and they have ready wit are suitable for the deputy speeches. But somebody who is able to like balance things out, and they can look at the bigger picture, right? And they understand, and they're good listeners, they'll be better web speakers, because you need to be able to keep in mind both the sides of the debate when you're a web speaker, and also what you did better. And you definitely have to be a very keen listener if you're going web. So yeah, that's how you decide who should go as which speaker. There's a lot of talking to each other that goes into this. Is someone unmuted? Okay, no. Cool. Now this. So first of all, there is no individual qualification. This means that you will proceed to the out rounds as a team, or you won't. So it's you doing well as a team or not going any further at all. That said, there are individual rewards for good speaker scores across rounds, etc. Top 42 ISDS selection, all of that I know you've been notified is going to happen. But when I say you're not going to qualify without the team to the out rounds, I mean you won't be able to come to IIT Delhi for the semis and finals if your team doesn't qualify. So individual rewards will happen and you'll get them. But then if you want to be in the out rounds, you need to be in the out rounds with your team. So in that sense, it's team qualification. Uh, Everybody, Team Telangana, one of the members I see wants to ask a question, put in the chat, not taking it verbally. Cool. And then there is this, okay, yeah, teams are requested to coordinate and prepare on motion. That's obvious. Sometimes you tend to think, okay, let's do individual speeches and we'll sound all synchronized. That's not how it goes. You're supposed to case prep together, only then will your speeches be synchronized. So if you start doing your individual speeches and then try to collate stuff, that's not going to happen. That's the wrong way of doing things. So when you're given the motion, ideally, this is what it should be like. You're given the motion, you come together for like a 30 minutes call with your teammates, you decide what the framework or the outline of your case is going to be, and then you start working on it. For example, I might be in a team with, okay, who are on my screen? So yeah, Aradhya and Rupashi, and then all three of us come together. So I say, let's run accountability from like government accountability and why that's important. And Aradhya might say, come up with some other like argument. And then we might have some inputs on framing all three of us. We reconcile all of it, we make notes, have a shared Google Doc, and then start preparing your speeches. Instead of saying, okay, we'll do individual speeches and then we'll consolidate it. That's like I mean, I see a lot of people doing it, but I don't quite understand how that will work ever, right? Because you could be going in different directions. How are you going to reconcile it once the speeches are there and done? So meet first and then write your speeches. Don't do it the other way around. Cool. And this is only a suggestion, but this is a good one, trust me. So the first and the second rounds will have the same motion again. I think I've reiterated multiple times now. Round three will have a different motion, is also something that I've explained. The last point is important though. So the theme remains the same, right? It's still India. We're still discussing India at large, but the sub theme is identity. Anything and everything that you can make of identity, okay? This is the most open-ended sub-theme. This is to say that we will be talking about identity, which would be powerful against powerless, discourse, and all of those things, right? So identity as in, what are the words that come to your mind when you relate, I mean, when you listen to these two words and when you string them together, identity and India. So the maxim unity in diversity, you can put it in the chat as well. That will give everybody some food for thought. So diversity, definitely minorities, how they're treated, reparations, reconciliation, all of these concepts are going to be a part of this particular sub theme. So yeah, I mean, there's really nothing I want to. I mean, I don't want to explain identities because then you will earmark this particular theme as what I'm saying. Identities could be anything related to people, the intersectionality in of identity in which we exist. So this could be women empowerment to caste discrimination to so many things, right? So this is very open-ended in that sense. Yeah, this time you will be given a verdict and OAs as well, hopefully. Yeah. Arshia, this is a direct message. Okay. So in the first speech, also I told you that it's not just the deputy speech and the whip speech I have uh explained. It's also the first speech where I said you have to do the framing, use 2-3 minutes there, and then you share your argumentation and preemption. How many teams will proceed to the out rounds? Well, that depends, okay? So what I'm saying is not set in stone yet, but it should be 4 teams per category. So because there's semis and then there's finals, right? So 4 teams. Points aren't cut when you have less arguments, like quantity doesn't matter so much, Team Gujarat. But then it's also about quality, right? So the quality of arguments is more important, but quantity, of course, you can't just run one argument and expect to win in a 6 minute long speech. So think about that. There has to be a balance. Any other questions? Think now if you have any questions because I'm literally here. Uh, Through chat and DMs, it becomes very difficult answering questions. You can go through these points as well. I'll be sharing the PDF. So don't skip setting up the context. Obviously, don't do that. Framing is important. Don't forget to analyze arguments, as in sometimes people run extremely underanalyzed points, extremely assertive stances. Don't undertake that. It's a difficult thing to judge the debate. As a judge, it's you want analysis, right? And you want proper mechanization of how this thinker got to a point and why are they making this point in the first place. Please don't think of anything as obvious or intuitive. Something might come to you very intuitively because you come from a certain place, right? To some other people it might not be so intuitive. So you and I think that women empowerment is required because we come in the same from the same society. We know it's required. There's gender disparity, but somebody who comes from a more privileged background might not think likewise. So what is intuitive to you is not intuitive to somebody else, is something that you need to understand. Examples are important. Use analogies if you want. Analogies really enrich your case, right? Yeah, and don't write your speeches wholly. Like I see a lot of people writing their speeches word for word. If you do it, you just circumscribe yourself. You can't go any further than what your speech permits you to do in that time, right? But then you're unable to be flexible in that sense. Have pointers and like, because you can add to those points. If you're just bullet points, if you're writing the whole speech, you're necessarily uh like delimiting the scope to which you could think and like add in your speech as well. Coordinate and share your ideas at all times. Yeah, government sectors. Cool. Okay, sixth point is not like relevant right now. It's for offline rounds, but all the other points I hope you understand. This also, please go through this. If there is any doubt about any of the points, you can ask in the chat. Is this clear? Can you all give me a thumbs up or something if you understand? Yeah, you can write the speech however you want. That's not an issue. Google Doc or like uh, pen and paper works. Yeah, you rebuttals are allowed. Rebuttals are allowed in web speeches, not an issue. Harshit, you have to put your question in the chat box if you need me to take it. Okay, I'm going to change the slide. So if anyone's still reading, you'll have to let me in on that. You will have this PDF after the round, after this session though, so it's okay. Go through this as well. Read the last point. The number of equity issues I had on research is bizarre. First of all, there's definitely no litmus test on how much of research has gone into making a speech. But then if you research, as in you research the argument itself, then it's pretty obvious. It also again delimits the extent to which you can probe further into the argument that you made in the first place, because it's a derivative argument. It's not original, it's not your own. It doesn't stem from the framing that you did by yourself. That's why the scope to which you can extend it is also limited. It's the most counterproductive thing that you can do to yourself, of finding the argument on the internet and then thinking I'll extend on it myself. That's not how it works. Because see, this is like you have the pieces of the puzzle and you just need to put it together. That's what parliamentary debates are about. It's not like MUNs where you do the research and then you uh, try to validate or substantiate what you're saying with the help of the research that you get. Here, you already have everything, right? Retrospectively, if you look at the motion that was set for the qualifiers, I don't think there was anything that like needed an like internet search per se. There might be some words that you don't understand. Sure, some people might not understand what reparations mean, or what they can, or the extent, or perhaps the polysemy in the word, right? Or how many meanings it can have. That's fine. But then fundamentally, if you've googled reparations and you know the meaning of reparations, post that you shouldn't be finding arguments on the internet. You shouldn't be going to chat GPT. That's not good. That's detrimental. And even if you think somebody is doing it, like your opponent is doing it, please rest assured that the judge marks you accordingly, which means that arguments derived from the internet will not yield the kind of results that your own substantive work will, because that's something that you wrote from scratch, which is why you'll be able to defend yourself better because it's your own original thinking. So please research meaningfully. Research the background, don't research the arguments. This is for your own goal. And judging criteria is exactly the same as it was. Matter, manner, method. I am also going to share this again on the group so you will have time to go through this individually at your own pace. In terms of next steps, guys, create a WhatsApp group with your team, okay? So like 3 people. And if you want to add your some guardian or parents, that's your call. I don't know. I don't want to get into it. But have some communication, all right? And if you have some communication lapses, like grievous ones, you come back to us in time and say, okay, this is a lapse. We don't quite know how to overcome it. We'll help you sort that. This has to happen in time though. You can't come to us a day before the tournament saying, hey, I don't know where my teammate is. We've never talked before. That's not a problem we can fix. So you have to keep the team updated, as in the organizing committee updated if you're finding frequent lapses in communication, all right? The second thing is that you create a common word Google Doc. Again, very it's suggested. We don't I don't know how you want to go about it. If you have better alternatives, go do that. But basically, for those of you who are clueless on how a team works, have a common Google Doc and put your thoughts there, and then meet frequently to discuss those thoughts and edit them as and when required. The third point says that you have to have discussion calls, Gmeet. Yeah, I mean that's how you edit your Google Doc, right? Don't start editing before notifying somebody else. So most of the fights that happen within teams are on the grounds of, hey, you changed my speech last minute. I didn't quite know what I was saying. Don't do that. That's extremely tactless. But in general, also, why are you trying to destroy your first speaker speech? Like they're not a part of the team. So if you want to make edits, if you think you're very smart and you could do a better first speech than your teammate, uh, please don't be that intrusive. But then, secondly, if you want to recommend something because it's really going to work for your teammate, then you have to first advise that and leave it at that. Don't actively edit the doc because you think it's your prerogative. Cool. Uh, yeah, motion clarifications, like I said, can happen. So for the prepared round, you can have motion clarifications in the chat itself. For the impromptu round, I'll be on the call that day, so you can get motion clarifications then. Either way, I'll be doing motion clarification once I've set and shared the motions. In case of motion, okay, you are required to prepare two documents per motion. Yeah, I mean, again, they suggested the last point that if you're going for and against, don't put everything in one Google Doc. To confuse yourself less, just have different Google Docs for each of the sites. And that's it. That's all I had to say today. After this, we'll only take questions. Yeah, each speaker gets to deliver one speech, and then you can ask POIs. Any speaker can ask any other speaker on from the other side on the other side of POI. That's not an issue. So a deputy can ask the first speaker on the other side of POI. That's completely doable. For semifinals, four teams per category should proceed, but then this is not set in stone. What I'm saying is subject to change. I'm not taking direct messages. I am only taking messages which are coming in the public chat. Shreyanshi, don't repeat your questions. Yeah, you can. Okay, rebuttals are allowed in the web speech. I think I've said this before as well. There have Are there any new questions? Can we use some Hindi phrases? Okay, yeah. Hindi phrases were also a problem in the one versus one round. Somebody said